like most Australians, I'm really frustrated by the years of policy failure in assisting some of the most underprivileged people in our country living in remote Aboriginal communities. And as Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister, pointed out on this program last night, too many face nutritional issues, a lack of education opportunities, family violence and other such really sad issues. For some, it's a hangover from the past when, well, the grog kept them settled and kept them out of nearby towns. And looking back, it's actually disgusting how some of these Aboriginal communities were treated. So many prominent Australians now see the latest political solution, though, a new big Canberra-based bureaucracy as proposed by this voice to Parliament as, well, not going to do much. Warren Mundine is one of them, and he joins me now. Warren, always good to talk to you. The debate around this voice, it's starting to create real division. But I think the broad consensus is Australians want our Aboriginal communities to be part of us, not treated separately. The voice is trying to divide us up.
Well, it's the goodwill of the Australian people out there and what they want to achieve for Aboriginal people and see them as part of the economy and see them as part of the wider Australian community and also contributing and also through running businesses, getting projects up and running in rural and remote areas, getting their kids into universities and becoming doctors and lawyers and engineers and school teachers and that. The goodwill's there. I haven't ran into any Australian who doesn't want to see things really happening. But as you probably know, I'm not a great supporter of this voice because you said it yourself. It's going to turn into this huge bureaucracy. This is what the Labor government does every time they get into power. They build up these big bureaucracies and that, and things do not change. And this is my main concern. And now they're talking about putting it in the Constitution. So even if it fails like so many other of these big bureaucratic voices that they've put the Parliament over the last 50 years, then we're stuck with this lemon, which the Aboriginal people, the Australian people, will be the ones who suffer because we've got to pay for it as Australian citizens, and Aboriginal people will not fix the education problems. It will not fix the economic issues, education, and so on that needs to be done.
Yeah, well, I think those remote communities are going to be the first ones hurt also by this rush to renewables because the first bit of power that's going to drop out are going to be, the further points out as well. There's so many things that are being done under the guise of trying to help that is in fact going to increase the harm, increase the victimhood. I think that's what the Labor Party are trying to create, a sense of victimhood amongst Aboriginal Australians.
Well, you've got it correct, and you're getting it from academia now, where there's these talks and education programs that are coming out, and it's about saying to Aboriginal people, it's not your fault, you're a victim. I had an argument with a person on Twitter once, which is my stupidity, but it was where he was saying, Warren, you are a victim. You'll always be a victim because of the colour of your skin. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, mate, I live in a mansion on the North Shore of Sydney, mate. If I'm a victim now, gee, I can't wait till I come out of that. I'll have a place on the harbour side by then. It's just this nonsense that goes on. Aboriginals are getting ahead and doing things, and the policies of the Abbott, Turnbull, and Scott Morrison, where they put in the Indigenous procurement policy, which turned Aboriginal economy from a free $2.6 million to now today, 7 years later, into a $6.7 billion economy. These are the things that are going to get kids at universities and schools. These are the things where they can see jobs and their parents working in that, and they can see the logic between jobs and education. And of course, the monies that's come into that is they will be able to afford holidays, healthcare, and stuff like that. But the most important thing we have to start looking at now is actually land reform, where they can own their own houses. And that builds on assets and builds on intergenerational wealth for those communities. So we're finally in the right position to do this. And here we've got the Labor government going back to the bad old days of setting up these nonsense voices.
Yeah, well, they call it separate development. In South Africa, they called it apartheid. I don't like it. Jacinta Price, who's just brilliant, she says that race has absolutely no place in the Australian Constitution. She's bang on, because I think Australians will resent the idea that there's this separate development factor now being reinforced and in the Constitution. There's so much goodwill, Warren, so much goodwill wanting to have good things happen. The last thing we need are more bureaucrats trying to stop it.
They don't need it in the Constitution. The federal parliament, the legislator, as you know, has got the legislative power to actually do it now. So if they think it's such a great idea, it's going to cure all the ills of the world for Aboriginal people, then why don't they just legislate it now and get on with the job, rather than spending over $300 million on a stupid referendum, which is causing nothing but division in Australia at the moment. You should see the racist tweets I get every day in regard to this voice. It's just dreadful. And look, to be quite frank, it's when you read the document, it's the same thing that we've tried about 5 times before. So if they say they failed, then why are they trying to do the same thing again?
Yeah, let's talk about that referendum, because it must be frustrating knowing that you're out there championing the no case, the no, we can do this a different way, but the government's only funding one side. There's a tax deductibility for the yes case. They're out there encouraging local government to go out and knock on doors and to really set people up. I mean, there's actually a nasty precedent here, Warren, because if they can get away with this referendum being only funding one side, who knows what's coming down the track?
Well, look, it's pinned the tail on the donkey. As soon as they got the legislation up, they gave tax deductibility to the yes campaign, but none for the no campaign. They've also got all these woke corporations who are ringing up every day and saying, you've got to support it, you've got to support it. You know, a friend of mine rang me the other day, yesterday, in fact, and said, I just got to, they were on one of the festivals they work on. And they said, I got a phone call saying that they want the festival to come out and say they support the voice. And so they took it to the board, and one of the board people said, well, why would we want to support the voice? And then the person said, oh, because it's a nice thing to do. Since when have we tinkered with our Constitution because it was a nice thing to do? The Constitution is the basis for this nation. It's legal basis about how we operate as a nation. And we finally, after all the struggles and that we had, we've got to a situation now where we're getting Aboriginals through universities, we're getting businesses all over. Look at the mining industry. If you believe people in Sydney and Melbourne, I think they hate Aboriginals hate the mining system. There's thousands of Aboriginals working in that mining system. Thousands of, and there's thousands of Indigenous businesses working there. So we're finally getting to this stage of education, and that we still do need to do a lot of work in those regional and remote areas because they're real struggling behind. So let's focus on that. Focus that $300 million for the referendum on those communities.
Yeah, Warren, I guess there's a lot we can talk about, and there's obviously a no campaign that you're trying to mount with Jacinta Price, and I think countless others now. Social media's picked a side. The point, though, you make about corporations leaning on other corporations, I'm starting to hear reports of companies who are saying to their suppliers, if you don't support us, there's sort of almost an ACCC-able kind of problem here where people are trying to influence other businesses' decision-making. This is the sort of division that's going on right now, and this thing's going to happen in August. It can't come soon enough, if you get what I mean. We've got to get Australia back on track on this.
Yeah. Oh, we got to. And look, I own a couple of businesses, and I'm on the London Stock Exchange with an energy company and that. And they get phone calls all the time, our shareholders and our board members and that, making, you've got to support it. You're right. That's actually bullying a situation where they're ringing up. And I can tell you, when we try, that's what I made a comment in the Australian Financial Review about about the voice and that. And if people are going to educate their staff, they need to have the yes and a no person there to talk. So one of the big corporations rang me up and said, our CEO thought that we should bring you in and have a chat. Well, 2 days later, their communications people, their Indigenous advisors rang me up and said, no, we decided to go a different way, Warren, we don't need you anymore. So all this, it's turning into a propaganda campaign, and people on the no side and the general public, they're just snowballing them to try and get this all up.
Yeah, well, Warren Mundine, no doubt we'll talk again very soon. Take care. Thanks for your time tonight.